Thanks for joining us. I see a whole bunch of people popping onto the webinar. Thank you so much. I'm Laura Scapitici, the Director of Programs for the Anthroposophical Society in America, and I'm so glad you are here with us tonight with Chris Burke and Patti Smith for the Phases of Life webinar series. And I'm just so excited to have you two here with me. Chris, I was just in your home state of Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
Patti, I just saw you at the Sacred Gateway Conference in New York, and I'm so glad you were able to join us. What I'd like to do is just find out a little bit about all of you that are coming onto the call. So if you can please into the Q&A, just let us know where you're viewing the webinar from. That would be super. Can you type it in? You see the Q&A? There should be a little Q&A button at the bottom, and you should be able to type in there where you're calling in from. So let's see. Anybody typing anything in? Try your best. There we go. Hello, Florida, Jamestown, Rhode Island, Canada. Hello. Pennsylvania, another Pennsylvania. That's great. Good. Santa Cruz, very nice. Houston, Texas. If you can use a Q&A, that'd be great. Good. Thank you all for coming onto the call. And if you're still coming on, you can let us know where you're coming from. But we're going to start out with a biography activity. So how about that? So why don't we just go right to that slide, Chris? That'd be amazing. Oh, and I see Massachusetts joining us too. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay, so on your screen, you should all see 6 different portraits. And they're all at different stages of life. And what we'd like you to do is to pick the one that basically captures how you're feeling right now and write a title for it and share that in the Q&A. So if you can look at those, share the number and the title. So we're going to give you a minute to do that. So for those coming on the call, welcome. And please look at these portraits, the one that speaks to how you feel right now, and write a title for it. So go ahead, and then you can share that with us in the Q&A. Just give people a minute. This is hard. Threw them right in. Okay, here we go. Anita says number 4, I feel awake. And Susan says number 2, forging ahead.
Nice.
And Kathleen, and if you can use the Q&A instead of the chat, that'd be super, says number 2, enjoying blossoms in spring.
Oh.
So nice. Number 4, Cynthia says number 4, inquisitive. And Stefano says number 2, still deciding where. Here we go, just a couple more. Oh, I'm missing the number, Ava, there we go, number 5, Ava says strength. Okay, well, I think I will turn it over to the 2 of you to introduce your wonderful selves. And again, thank you for being here. And thank you for everyone for just jumping right in with the activity.
Great. Well, hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Patti Smith. I've just retired from 35 years in a career in education, starting as a Waldorf kindergarten teacher for 10 years and spending 25 years researching urban public schools. I'm in the 63 plus, onward and upward, a wonderful time. I'm able to review the fruits of my life and see how I can use myself up in service of the world. In my final years, I'm particularly interested in finding ways to work with young adults as they take on leadership positions. And I'm learning in my first couple of months of retiring, or untiring as I like to call it, that it's a really important time to slow down, and listen deeply to myself so creativity and enlivened life can emerge from me.
Great. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Chris Burke, and I'm a psychology professor at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I live in Philadelphia with my wife and our kids. And I'm in the phase of life that goes from age 35 to 42. And this is the last portion of what next time we'll call the sun years. And this is a time of life when many things are going on. Life is full of activity. It's a time of life when people are really striving to realize the ideals that they've established for themselves. So I find myself busy with lots of different kinds of activities that I've invited into my life. And the challenge of this time can be finding ways to find a sense of balance between all of these different activities, being able to give enough attention to each of them while still having enough time for everything else. So that's a little bit about me, and I hope you enjoy the webinar series. Oops. So what is biography and social art? To begin to answer that question, I'm going to split it up into two pieces. First, what is human biography? And then second, what is the social art way of working with human biography? This work starts with the premise that the human life forms a coherent whole that can be understood if we investigate it with a little bit more, if we probe it a little bit deeper than we're used to in ordinary life. And I like to think that, this coherent whole is what we call a person's biography. And if we think about the coherent whole of our life, it can sometimes be difficult to apprehend it that way because, we're experiencing it in process. And that coherence is often interrupted by unexpected and sometimes unpleasant experiences, failures and setbacks and painful experiences. And it can be hard to find a coherence during those times. I like to think about the metaphor of maybe the last time that you read a biography of a person, or maybe you saw a film about the life of a public figure. And imagine what that story would be like if there hadn't been any of the setbacks or the difficult experiences or the adversity. You would probably say, well, that makes for a pretty uninteresting life, right? When we can see a person's life in that kind of wholeness from an outsider's perspective, it can be, it can be easy to see those difficult experiences as instrumental for getting to where the person ultimately ends up or achieving what they ultimately achieve. So the challenge then is how do we bring that level of clarity, bring that kind of outsider perspective into our own lives so that we can see them more clearly. And so this is exactly what the work of biography is. So biography work is aimed at supporting individuals in seeing their life with this greater level of clarity and seeing their life path as it's unfolding. And this work is approached in many different ways by practitioners around the world. In the United States, it's primarily, the primary stream is the one that Patti and I are connected to, which is called biography and social art. And so in this approach, we bring social activities, artistic activities, to help to loosen up people's past experiences and allow them the possibility of seeing them in a new light. So for instance, we might invite you to model something in clay. We might ask you to draw a picture of a scene that you found yourself in sometime in the past. Or we might do like what we did in the opening activity. We might give you a set of postcards and ask you to find the one that resonates with an experience that you've had in some way. This work is typically done in a group setting, and really an essential part of biography and social art work is the experience of sharing your stories with one another. And there's really a deep kind of impact that it can have on an individual just to be listened to by someone who's not judging them or evaluating them, but really just listening. And there's also huge value in experiencing the humanity of other people's stories. And so that's really the way that we're used to working. And so working in this virtual sphere is a little bit of a new thing for us, but it's an exciting way of opening up new possibilities. One other thing we wanted to emphasize about biography and social art work is that that it's meant to be an enriching experience for everybody who undertakes it. It's not meant to be something that's reserved for clinical or therapeutic applications. So we hope that this webinar gives you a taste of biography and social art work, and we really encourage you to find an in-person workshop to try it out sometime that way.
Right, and I'd just like to add that since we know that we're in the midst of the consciousness soul age, as this is a webinar of the Anthroposophical Society, and it's nice to be able to speak in these terms, that part of our work in developing the soul needs of the time is to develop and deepen our soul capacities. And this work is developing those muscles to more deeply hear ourselves and to be able to more deeply hold and witness the other. It seems to be a very important aspect of human development, particular to our times. And actually, I'd say more interestingly, at these times in our country, to be able to hold people with different points of view, and that everybody's story helps us to find something we have in common and gives us the opportunity to carry something that we hold differently than another person in a non-judgmental way. And so for me, those attributes and the brilliant way in which Chris described how all of that can occur are really significantly important to the development of this work at this time in humanity.
And I was just going to add, if people have an opportunity to go to the workshop, they'll get to see all this beautiful, but the beautiful image you have on the screen and the postcards and all of those things. And I've seen groups of people that don't have any connection to each other, maybe just through one theme, come together and emerge, and it changes the whole room. So I do hope, if you haven't been to biography, if you haven't had a biography practitioner come, that this will encourage that, because it really does amazing things. And any group I've ever been in with biography, it's really fantastic. Thanks for this beautiful picture.
Thanks. So the theme of our webinar over these next 3 sessions is to introduce the phases of life as they were described by Rudolf Steiner and then carried forward by many other people who've worked in the area of biography, including those who are listed in the resource list, which will be included at the end of this presentation. And according to this approach, life unfolds according to a 7-year rhythm, approximately 7-year rhythm. And with each passing 7-year period, new faculties are awakened and developed within the individual. The graphic that's on this screen comes from Signe Schaeffer's book, Why on Earth? And it's a depiction of the overarching process of development, right? There's a development of the physical body that happens over time. There's a soul development that happens, and there's a spiritual development that happens over time. And over the course of the lifespan, these interweave in and interact in important and interesting ways. And so each of the 3 main phases of life, from birth to 21, 21 to 42, and 42 onwards, has certain characteristics that are related to that development that's happening and those interactions that are happening at that time. We could characterize these periods in different ways, but we could say that, in the first third of life, that's really the building up of the body. The middle phase of life is really about a soul process, a soul deepening. And then the third phase of life is about spiritual development, or rather we might say that the possibility of spiritual development, right? Depending on whether the person decides to take that up or not. So each of the sessions of the webinar is going to cover one of these 3 broad phases. And so that's going to be the content. However, in line with the biography and social art approach that we've talked about, we're interested in doing more than just telling you how people are. We really want to engage you with your experience of the phases that you've passed through, and to really reflect on, to what extent do the ways that we characterize these phases map onto your experience during that time? In what ways do they resonate with you? And maybe in what ways does your experience deviate from that prototype? And paying attention to those sorts of things can be, really can help you achieve some insights into your own biography and your own unique path through life.
Oh, Chris,
Oh, what? Oh,
please tell them why
and I have to say,
beautiful clay portraits.
Patty would really like me to say something about these clay heads at the bottom, which I was planning to mention. So this actually comes from an activity that we do in the training program, where we're first invited to model the head of a baby out of clay, and just sort of find that however we could. And over the course of quite a while, we build up these heads. We allow them to age. We allow them to pass through the phases of life, all the way until old age. And for me, it was a really powerful experience to see the individualities emerging in these individuals, and to see how really divergent the results were. By the time these individuals became adults, and then in their later years across the groups, they really developed a very distinct personality. So this was a really striking experience for me. So I decided to include a few of these images to sort of represent the three phases.
Great, thank you, Chris. So we're going to be focusing this first session on what is probably the most well-known phase, birth to 21, childhood. Unlike the adult phases we'll be discussing in later webinars, we tend to be familiar with the terms used to describe the 7-year phases in this time frame. For example, we know that we call birth to 7 early childhood. The middle years, we call the middle years, 7 to 14, or tweens. And then from 14 to 21, we usually refer to adolescence and emerging adulthood. This overarching phase, we will find tonight, is an amazing time of growth and self-discovery for human becoming.
Great, and to help you live back into the experiences of childhood, we're going to lead you into another exercise. So we'd like you to think back to your childhood and try to recall some of the family commandments that governed your home life. Now, these could be spoken or unspoken commandments, but they're statements that might have started in our family. This is how we do things. This is how it is. So take a minute to reflect on those family commandments. Think about what they were in your family. And when you have something, you can maybe write 1 or 2 of them into the Q&A box. And as you're doing so, think about how you experienced those commandments at the time. Was that how did that feel for you to live with those commandments?
Should we sing a song while people are?
Yeah, and so to clarify, thanks for this beautiful picture here. Are people going to, they're going to share what it felt like to live with the commandments, not the commandments, or they could share both? What are you thinking?
We would love to see some of the commandments, I think.
Okay, that's great. So you can all type that into the Q&A, and I'll be able to, and only share what feels right for you to share. You don't have to reveal more than what feels right for you. As this is a very public webinar that, I think at least 100 people will be receiving. So, but feel free to share what you want. And the sharing is something that helps others. Anita's asking, would you give me an example of a commandment?
Sure. Patty, would you like to share one?
Well, it's a little bit comical, but I'm an Irish Catholic, and in my family, one of the commandments when we had company, which we often did, was that the family never takes the last piece of fish or the last piece of bread or the last scoop of peas when we have company. That was an absolutely forbidden thing to do.
Got it. That's a great example. Okay, I do have Karen saying, we don't talk about family mental illness. One of the commandments, that's not something you talk about. Thank you for sharing that. That's a big commandment. Anybody else have any they want to share? We'll just take another few seconds here if anybody else wants to share one. This is a tough one.
And you know, Laura, I'm thinking if there's anybody who doesn't want their name shared, just put NMN, not my name.
Not my name. Got it.
And then Laura won't expose who said it.
Sounds good. We don't do things for money. We don't do things for money. That's Stefano said that. We don't do things for money. Anybody else? Tell the truth. I said, tell the truth. Yeah, and some people are having a little bit of a hard time, but we're really doing this under a time pressure. So you would have more time for this, and you might write about it or do something else related to it, draw it in a typical workshop. But thank you all for thinking about this. Great. I think we can go to the next.
And as we're moving forward, continue to think about it because we're actually going to come back to this later. So
great. And it can just be a word, or it could be
right.
a picture that comes up for you, or anything. It doesn't.
Right.
It's not fixed.
Great.
Okay, now we're going to move into early childhood. And it's a good thing I'm limited to 4 minutes because I could talk to you about this for days. Picture yourself walking into a room, and over in the corner in a rocking chair is a mother holding a beautiful newborn baby, small and fragile. But doesn't this picture fill the room with vitality and light? It's a very powerful image coming from such a small being. And with that, in the first 7 years, children take their first breath. They become citizens of this world. It's important to consider that they arrive on Earth in a very vulnerable state of dependency. This is important to remember because we're going to come back to this when we are excarnating from life in the last stage, in the last webinar. At that time, we are also having this similar sense of helplessness. So and at that time, we'll begin to see some mirroring of the past. Children are sponges. They learn from imitation. They soak up everything that they imitate from the adults and from the environment around them. They're absorbing everything. Imagine they learn to stand, to walk, and to speak and think, all in the first 3 years of life. They establish these fundamental characteristics of being a human being in only 3 years. It's a time of dramatic physical growth and maturation as the spiritual forces gradually draw into the physical body as it builds up and out into the world. These growth forces culminate in the loss of milk teeth. That's when these forces are pushing out the hereditary forces as individuation begins. The first 7 years are associated with the moon, both the forces of heredity and the nurturance of the mother and nature enveloping the child. We get a sense of this time as the quiet of night, the reflection that we think about with the moon, and of course nighttime and the starry heavens. So it's a bit magical and mysterious. Rhythm is an important part of the bodily development. Children need regular daily patterns for eating, sleeping, and playing. As the stronger these rhythms are in their physical surroundings, the stronger their organs will be able to develop. If you're familiar with Waldorf early childhood programs, you'll recall that they're designed to address these needs. Much thought is given to the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the week, to seasonal festivals, to the quality of materials, to a healthy dose of pro-social activities in circle time, and snack time. And these same qualities and ways of living can also be established in homes, so that this strong environment of nurturing, care, rhythm, and happiness can be possible for children at this age. In biography work, we consider the following issues from this phase. What is my gender? What is my birth order in the family? What was my emerging body type? Was I small and compact? Was I long and lean? What types of imitation do I remember? How was I treated? Did I have childhood diseases? What are my first memories to help me understand myself? Answering these questions will help us to discover the gifts we brought to the world, what we came to accomplish, and what patterns stick with us throughout life. This phase of little children is mighty. It's the foundation on which the house of our earthly being it rests.
Thanks for that picture, Patti. So now we'll move on to the middle childhood years from 7 to 14. And during this time, the soul life really begins to stir within the individual, and the child begins to develop special interests, interests in certain hobbies, interests in sports they want to be involved with, interests in musical instruments or other activities that they want to get involved with. The child's temperament, which is the seed of their personality, also begins to take on a more consistent color during this time. As a parent, it can be surprising that your children could have dispositions that are so different from each other or so different from your own. And sometimes these temperaments can create some tension within families or within classrooms. But really learning to see the temperament as a child's temperament as an essential ingredient in that person's biography and the person that they're going to become and the path that they're going to tread through life, that it provides both challenges and opportunities to the individual that they need to take up. That can be a really fruitful exercise for parents and teachers. Now, middle childhood is a time of fantasy play and imagining oneself in different roles. Actually, doing so is some of the most important work of this time, right? To really, the child is imagining themselves in different roles. And if you observe children playing during this time, you can see that social play involves role playing in which the storyline is written and rewritten as the play unfolds. And there's this kind of fluid social consciousness that goes along with playing during this time. And it's really important that the child has an opportunity to explore different identities and to have the inner experience associated with these different roles. Ideally, doors should remain open for children during this time. The child should really feel like anything is possible. That's kind of the experience of this time. And as much as parents like to think that they know what their children ought to turn into, it's really, the child themselves, the individual is the only one who can really connect with their true path as they navigate through life. Middle childhood is connected with the planet Mercury, and Mercury is connected to movement, quickness, and fluidity, like the metal of the same name, which is also connected to this time of life. Mercury, as a mythological god, is connected with is the messenger of the gods, and it's connected with the god of travelers, merchants, and thieves. So we get this kind of interesting composite picture emerging for Mercury of this kind of mobility, this fluidity, this communication, and also this experimenting and playing with identities. And in working with this phase biographically, we sometimes focus on that social sphere that extends beyond the family, and how is the child expanding their social sphere. How did you experience school and other kinds of institutions during that time? What were the rhythms during that time that provided a sense of stability, right? Providing that sense of stability that allows for the role playing, that allows for the fantasy life to be nice and rich. This phase also contains an important experience known as the 9-year change, which is, for many children, a powerful waking up kind of experience in which they experience themselves as separated or separate from their family and their world for their first time. And this can be a very strong and, in some cases, upsetting experience for children, but a challenging experience to navigate in any case. And during this time, children also begin to have can start to have a waking up of their spiritual life as well. And so these are some of the kinds of elements that we might explore when we look at this phase biographically.
I was just going to say, I hadn't heard of that. Waking up of their spiritual life. That's really interesting to me. Maybe I can ask a question about that later.
Sure.
Thanks. It's a beautiful slide. Is that a book? The Rise and Fall of Mount Majestic? It's gorgeous.
It is a book. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So to transition to sort of in the spirit of that phase, we want to lead you into another exercise. And what we'd like you to do this time is to think back to your childhood and think about the first profession that you imagined that you would be when you grew up, or the vocation that you imagined for yourself when you grew up. And we'd like you to think about that profession or vocation as you reflect on the following questions. And don't feel like you need to have answers for all of these questions. Just hear the questions and see what comes to you as I read through them. If you find anything, you might make some notes to yourself, and then we'll invite you to share anything that you might like to share. So what was that vocation? What was that profession or vocation that you imagined yourself being when you grew up? How old were you when you developed that interest? What was it about that profession that drew you in? What was it like to imagine yourself in that role? So again, take a minute or so to live back into that experience. And if you'd like to share that vocation or anything about what you've remembered about it, please feel free to do that in the Q&A box.
That's great. Yep. So feel free to share that. I'm just going to read them again. What was the first vocation?
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when that came to you?
Mm-hmm.
What was it about it that like spoke to you or appealed to you or that you liked? And what was it like to imagine yourself doing that?
That's right. Yeah.
Or in that role. Okay, great. Thanks. So please, feel free to share whatever you'd like to share, as this is a biography workshop. We would love that in a way. Okay. Angela saying a teacher, and she was 6, and she loved her first grade teacher, and the teacher seemed fun, smart, and important. Good. Thanks for sharing that. That was a great example. Oh, another teacher, first grade, and it's Kathleen, and she loved the desks and the chalkboard. Can totally see that. That's great. Oh, these are so great. Stefano's saying a veterinarian, he was probably 5, and he can't really say where that came from. Let's see. Yes, it was out of the question that he could do anything else. That was it. That was it. He's going to become a veterinarian. That's great. Okay. Anybody else want to share? See if we get 1 or 2 more. Okay. And here's Karen. Oh, this is okay. I love this. I wanted to be a superhero like Mighty Mouse or Underdog. Those are like my 2 favorite. I think I could sing the theme songs right now, because she wanted to rescue people in trouble. So she wanted to be the rescuer. That's great. Thank you. Okay.
Great.
Good.
Thanks, everyone. So now we are going to move into the third phase of childhood, the last phase of childhood, which are the years from 14 to 21. And this is a time that we might call adolescence and emerging adulthood. And see if I can find myself in my notes here. I've lost myself. Bear with me. Ah, yes. Right. So during this time, the spiritual forces really start to take hold within the individual, and the child at this point has completed the sort of awkward physical changes of puberty and is growing into their full mature physical stature, and they also begin to sort of live into their experience of themselves as an individual, right? Living into their individuality. At the same time, there's also a strong need during this time to be socially connected, to be attached to a particular group that values and accepts the individual for who they are. And really being approved by that group is really important. And I'm sure everyone can think back to those fun years of high school and remember the different cliques that existed within the student group. There were the jocks and the nerds and the punks and these various groups. And maybe you can remember for yourself, that there was one or more of those groups that it was really important that you had a connection to, that they accepted you and that you could feel like you were a part of something. So with adolescents, we see that they have this experience of kind of towing the line between being different enough, but not being too different. Right? You want to be a bit different enough to stand out, to be an individual, to feel unique, but you don't want to be so different that you don't get accepted or aren't accepted by these important social groups. Adolescence can be a very tumultuous time, full of big experiences, big opinions, big emotions, and big everything, right? It's a big time. And the adolescent is really experimenting with being a grown-up, being themselves. And one of the ways that adolescents learn to stand on their own 2 feet is to just continuously getting knocked down through problems at school, fights with friends, getting broken up with by romantic partners, having falling outs with parents. These are all of the big kinds of experiences that help the adolescent to figure out who they are and where they want to go. Of course, as a parent, it can be hard to not intervene and try to fix all of the problems that your teenager gets into, or to protect them from any chance of harm. But also, that if you try to intervene with teenagers, it often backfires, right? They don't want your help. You stay out of their business, right? So really, above all, the adolescent really wants to know that their parents care for their safety and well-being, and that they'll be there for them if they need to, when they experience setbacks. But they want it to be on their terms, right? They want it to be their way. The adolescent years is connected with the planet Venus, and Venus is the goddess of beauty. And when we think about the awkwardness and the big emotions and all of the things that are associated with the adolescent years, it can become difficult to maybe make a connection with beauty. But one of the links that we find anyway is in the experience of ideals, right? So if we think about Venus as representing idealized beauty, that's really kind of out of reach. When someone experiences an ideal like that, you can respond in different ways, right? One way to respond would just be to give in and say, I can't reach the ideal. I'm going to settle for just what is. Alternatively, you can say, well, maybe I can't get there, but I'm going to try to get there. I'm going to strive for the ideal and get as close to the ideal as I can. And that's something that we often see with teenagers, with adolescents, is this striving for the ideal even when it's unattainable. But we can also see the other pole as well. Venus also represents the divine inner beauty of my true self or my destiny. And it's during this time that adolescents sometimes get a faint glimpse of their destiny, a faint glimpse of their specific task in life. And so that's something that we often work with in biography work. Many adolescents form a picture of an ideal world that's really in stark contrast with the world as it exists. And they develop this kind of fire to try to close that gap. And by the time I see them as college students, the passion and enthusiasm for making the world a better place is often palpable, right? They really want to do something. They really want to make the world a better place. And here again, this is a place where letting them experience this fire is really important, right? It could be easy to say, well, look, that's just not the way the world works. But this could really knock them off course, right? They need to experience those limits themselves and find their own way to work around them or overcome them or work through them. And much of the next phase of life that we'll talk about in the next session, the 21 to 42 years, is all about the sort of back and forth struggle of trying to reconcile the ideals with the reality of the world. But during these adolescent, early adult years, they're not quite ready for that yet. They need to experience that fire. So as we work with this phase biographically, we might focus on those ideals, what they are and where they come from. So for instance, who are the role models? Who are the people that the adolescent really looks up to for wisdom, for advice, for counsel? We might also explore the emerging independence that they have during that time. We might look at what are the responsibilities that they're given at that time, and how do they handle those responsibilities. We might look at how empowered they feel within their family or within their social groups to make decisions for themselves. And again, how do they handle that power? And maybe also in what ways they felt that they had or felt that they lacked confidence in themselves and their ability to make good decisions. So that's a little summary of those adolescent and early adult years. Now I'll turn it over to Patti again.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. And I think the fact that I hate to put you on the spot, but because I think we might have an extra couple of minutes here, I'd be really interested in hearing a little more about how some of your students express that idealism and passion. Do you have a couple of off the top of your head examples of how they do that?
Yeah, well, I think so. The students that we get are very enthusiastic about making the world a better place. They are involved in volunteering. They often do volunteer trips abroad where they can go into places where they think that big problems exist and they can help people. They are involved with fraternities and sororities that have a big philanthropic focus where they try to raise money for worthy causes. So they see the problems in the world and they try to think, what can I do from where I sit to actually make a difference there? One of the things that I try to do while I have them with me is not to quench the fire, but to help to channel that enthusiasm in productive directions. Because sometimes, if you just take that enthusiasm and you go into the developing world and try to fix people's problems, you could actually end up creating problems for people that you are trying to help. So part of what we try to do is to help to broaden their worldview, broaden their perspectives on what does it mean to be a helper and what does it mean to make the world a better place.
Great example. It's quite an important role that you play as a professor. So, okay, everyone, that's a rather walnut shell overview of this particular phase in life, and hopefully you've gotten a small picture of how each phase, even within this 21 years, you can sort of feel in the physical body, the soul developing, the spiritual capacities developing. And we asked you to think about yourself in relation to your life at that time. And I'm going to hearken you back to the exercises that we did and remind you that we asked you first to think of a commandment in your childhood, and hopefully, as we've been speaking, a couple have been popping into your head, because I'd like you to now consider, yes, so I had that commandment about not taking the last bit of food. Did I drop that once I was on my own? And is there perchance a way that has come back into my own family life or way of expecting people to be? So I'd like you to think about that in relation to that first exercise. I'll say it again. You can identify a commandment, or hopefully you did, from your childhood. And now, standing from or sitting from where you're sitting right now, listening to this webinar, is that commandment still a part of your life, or did you let it go long ago and it's long gone?
Right, and no judgment either way, just an observation,
No
right?
judgment, just
Right.
let yourself live into that question as a, and then we had a second exercise, which was about your early profession. And I want you to think now back to that early profession. Can you find elements of that vocation in the actual work you do now? Is it actually what you were thinking about when you were an adolescent that you ended up actually doing? Does that actually happen anymore? And so think about that. And then, is there any connection to either, are there any common threads about your commandments and about what you were, what you thought as a young child, and where you sit now, that you're observing as you do these exercises that you might want to share? So that's sort of a three-part question. Is there anything I'd like to share about how the commandments live in me now, or why they don't? And is there any relationship of that first vocation I was thinking about to the actual work I do now? And can you see any threads from either or both of those things that seem important for you to note at this point in time? Or does that seem like it's clear? Are you getting any, juice there?
Yep, we're getting some folks answering. I'll just start out with the commandment of not doing things for money, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
And that one is still there, and it's caused some imbalances and wrong decisions. So at least
Hard
that's
to pay a mortgage without money, right?
yes. But again, who knows what that means exactly. And the wish to be a veterinarian was actually regretted. So that came through, but it's sort of ended up being a regret. Okay, thanks, Stefano, for that. Okay, here's Karen. This is interesting. So the commandment about not talking about mental illness became this like sort of commitment to engaging in therapy to heal wounds. And now she's drawn to becoming a counselor so she can support other families that might have that going on. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, here are a few more. The third part was to see the commandment, see how it connects, see the profession, see how it connects, and are there any threads that connect those two things, right? The commandment and
right.
Or anything that just
any reflections that come out of thinking
right.
about things.
So any reflections, that's fine. I think you did that very well, Stefano. Okay. There was a commandment to support the arts that was shared, so that was nice. And this person now, and they knitted and they sewed as a child, and now they're a handwork teacher. That's Barbara.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's the commandment was the eldest male sits at the head of the table. And that still is happening. And now that Kathleen's awake to it, she might change it. So thank you for waking her up to it. And then remember the one about the truth? This is so great, everyone. Thank you for participating. That Ava said that telling the truth has become much more meaningful, and it's become core to her being. So I think that's really nice. And the superhero one, Mighty Mouse or the underdog, she's a teacher, and that's just like being a superhero.
Agreed.
We all agree. Okay, here comes another one. I think we just have another minute here. Good. Yeah, we're good. We're doing great. A commandment in Susan's family was education is very important. and she actually wanted to be a cowgirl. And that has not gone into her future, but education has continued to be essential, and she continues to pursue education and adult education. So that one came through, not the cowgirl one, but
There's still time.
you can at least get some boots. Okay. Oh, okay. And the reflection on the veterinarian and the money thing is that veterinarians work for passion, not for money. So that was a connection. That, thanks for bringing up that thread. Okay. Here's another one. Oh, these are so good. Anita says her single mom never had extra money for anything, so she couldn't afford anything new. And now she does that with her son. And she tells them they shouldn't spend the money. And she's also a kindergarten teacher, and she never thought she would be. So that money piece, we've seen that come up a few times. Yeah, and that's interesting because we did a webinar series on the spirit of money, and I feel like a little bit of the biography piece with the money, if you do money and biography, it's really fascinating. So here, that's our next series, guys. Okay, those were some great sharings, hey?
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for your willing participation and your thoughtful responses to those exercises.
Thank you.
Bravo.
So in the time that we have left, we would love to answer some of your questions about what we've covered today. And also, if you have any other comments, reflections, surprises, or wonderings that have come up for you as we work through this material today, feel free to share those as well. So if you can just put your questions and or comments into the Q&A box, we'll take some of the rest of the time here for answering those questions.
Great. So let's see if anybody has any questions. Yeah, I was laughing a lot at the profession one because because I wanted to be a flying trapeze.
And you are.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to explore that one a little bit more, or a jazz dancer. So I think both of those are actually true. And it's interesting that you brought in the planets. That's sort of new for me. So thanks for bringing that in. And I wonder if, I guess maybe we'll talk about this more, like if a person continues to relate to one planet over time, or does that happen that ends up carrying? I don't know. Oh, I do have a question though, but maybe you can answer that one. Can you just say a little bit more about the planets?
Sure, yeah. So right, so there are planets that are associated with each of these phases of life. But also, if we look at Rudolf Steiner's larger picture of incarnation and how we pass through planetary spheres as we're incarnating, there's individuals based on whatever their experiences are and tasks are in the future life. They might spend more time in certain spheres than others and have more of those kinds of connections. They might have a closer connection with certain planets. And so, so while you do have the planets being associated with particular phases, where I think of it's sort of like a resonance or something that happens during that phase, there are individual differences in how strongly the planets live with different people. And also, I mean, the planets are also connected to kind of the astral level. And so there's this kind of dynamics of the planets where you can, you can conjure your Mars in a situation, or, tame your Saturn, or whatever it is that you have to do. You can work with those a little bit more.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And Patti, just so you know, we see your computer screen now, not you. We see your computer, not you. Okay. Here's a question.
Did that change it?
No, we're just looking at your keyboard. You don't worry. Just go ahead and see if you can work it out. We can still hear you. I think maybe
keyboard. Wait, I don't get it.
I think
you just flip your camera.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Here are two questions with the time remaining. This is an interesting. Oh, there's more. There are more. There's three. Let's see. Can we do like 2 minutes on each or something? And we're at time then, or maybe 1 minute. Stefano, in psychological research, is there any evidence that evidence is an interesting word. Professional vocations are karmic. So I don't know. That's kind of a big one to take on.
Well, I mean, I could say something very briefly about that. Is that really there's not psychological research on things like karma, and you know, that's something that I'm working with is really to try to create some bridges between these different worlds that, you know, in most of what we think of as psychological research, we don't touch things that involve soul and spirit, and so to think about karma in the context of psychological research, it just really isn't happening yet. But I think we're moving in a direction where we can start to ask those kinds of questions.
Great, thank you. Angela's saying the geographical upbringing seems important. Like she's saying she grew up in Europe, and due to historic events for her parents, the values seem different. So I don't know if we'll have a chance. She might to explore that at some point, but the context in which you grow up and the influence that has. I think that's just more of a reflection that maybe we can touch on a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think it's an important point to bring up. I think that particularly in this country we live in, your ethnicity is going to have a pretty strong impact on opportunities and how you grow up and how you see yourself and other people see yourself in the world. So yes, that's a very important perspective to view your life from.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there are different perspectives on it too. I mean, if you look at like the existentialist philosophers like Heidegger, you know, there's this sense of thrownness, right? That people are just thrown into this world to a particular time and place with particular parents, and that it's, you know, they end up with different chances due to no fault of their own, right? And so there's this sort of reconciling. How do you come to terms with that? But there are other ways of thinking about it too, right? Asking questions about, well, is there something about this time and place that I was born that is actually an important part of my biography that actually speaks to the path that I'm on, the tasks that I need to fulfill in this life.
Thank you for that. And last one, I think. Yes. Ava is saying she's wondering about how one's birth order is so connected to our life experience through all the phases. So I don't know if you can say something brief about birth order, and then we'll just go to the next slide and finish up.
Well, there are, we don't have time to go into it in detail, but I think I think some of the resources that we've given you, it is, you know, the firstborn, the secondborn, thirdborn, fourthborn, that as you come into your family in these different placements, there are particular, but firstborn often have the responsibility for all the other children in the family. They're usually highly responsible. Second, if there are 3 children and there's the secondborn in the middle of the being born, you know, the sort of middle child, and why would you be a middle child where you have to kind of look up and look down and be in the middle? And so you can just begin to imagine into that question, and maybe even say to yourself, could I have chosen to be the fourthborn, the final, the one who either is most beloved because they were wanted so much, or whatever? So it's not a thorough answer, but it hopefully it wets your whistle. And I think that in Leavigood's book, he begins to address that. And I think it also comes up in Signy's book.
That's great. And so we will have resources for everyone. There's a resource slide, and the recording, of course, will be sent to everybody too. But I wondered if you could, yeah, perfect. So we know the next webinar session is on ages 21 to 42. And I love what you're doing, where even if we're out of that stage or not quite in that stage, we're going to have an ability to connect with it. You know, and going back, that's really fantastic. But I did want to talk about the biography training at the Center for Biography and Social Art, and I believe that's in Spring Valley, New York, the training, right?
That's right.
And I just want to say, I really wish I could come. This work is just so fantastic. But you have a new cohort starting this year, right? And I am going to email that information to people in case they're interested. Everybody will get that information. But starting in July.
Great. Starting in July, that's right. And the program meets 4 weeks a year over 3 years, and we learn about all different aspects of biography, human biography, and gather all of the tools that we need for working with biography and social art. So it's a lot of fun, and you'll meet great people that you'll be friends with forever.
No, that's so great. Okay, well, thank you both so much. This was such a nice overview, and I know there's so much more that could be done. And in these webinars, we really just get a taste, and then people have an opportunity to do a deeper dive, either in a training or having a biography practitioner come to their community. Or I think a lot of biography practitioners work with people individually too, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. And if you go to the website, you'll see a very interesting master class that's going to be occurring in October, looking very deeply into karma and working with a school that does this work will be coming from Israel.
Oh, wow.
There are other ways to begin to dive into the work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. And thank you everyone on the call for sharing.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And yeah, that makes it. Thank you so much. And
see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, see you in 2 weeks. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.